Welcome everyone to today's webinar. I'm Susan Hedstrom, the Executive Director for FPWR, and I'll be moderating for you today. There has been a lot of chatter on social media as of late regarding daytime sleepiness in PWS. So today, Albana Petroneva and Crystal Davis from Harmony Biosciences will be sharing details on their phase 2 study of Pitolisant. This study is currently enrolling participants ages 6 to 65 who have PWS at multiple sites across the US. Albana and Crystal, thank you for joining us. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Susan, and I'll be first. I'll share the first several slides. So thank you everyone for joining this webinar. It has been a pleasure for us to be in front of you and remind you about that study. For those of you who participated in the previous one, you might be able to see some differences because we have been listening to patients and physicians who enroll patients for our study. And we try to make the protocol friendlier for physicians and patients. So without further ado, I'll start the presentation. I'll start with some introduction about our company. And Harmony is a relatively new company. It has been formed in 2017, and it has been formed within the Paragon umbrella, and there are several companies. And again, the company was formed because we in-licensed Pitolisant, which is our current and only asset. And it has been developed in France, and the co-founder of the company that developed the compound was actually someone who was linked to the discovery of the H3 receptor. We did become a public company in 2020, and we are now a fully integrated pharmaceutical company with about 160 employees. That being said, on the research and development side, we are a much smaller team. And as you can see on the right-hand side of the slide, we are very busy because we have multiple new indications that we have been researching for Pitolisant. One of them is the topic of our conversation today, which is the study in excessive daytime sleepiness for patients with Prader-Willi. This is the timeline of the company. In October 2017, the company was established. And even before the company was formed, there was interest in Pitolisant in the Prader-Willi community, and probably some of you have been part of this very early interest. And then in December 2017 was the first meeting at the National Institute of Health held with Prader-Willi patients and participants from our company. We have been thinking and talking about Prader-Willi. We had a lot of work to do in order to get Pitolisant approved for the main indication, which is narcolepsy in adult patients. But again, we started thinking about Prader-Willi very early, and in October 2018, we were already at the annual meeting of the Foundation for Prader-Willi Research. And we have been conceptualizing putting this study and doing a good phase 2 study to study excessive daytime sleepiness in patients with Prader-Willi. And meanwhile, in March or April 2019, we heard of some case studies about patients who had been administered Pitolisant. Then we became even more interested, and already in the second meeting that we attended for the Foundation for Prader-Willi Research, we already presented the design of the study that we are currently enrolling. In December 2019, we conducted the phase 1 study, which was a PK study for patients who already have been receiving Pitolisant prescribed by their physicians. And again, in 2020, we continued to follow up these same patients on an open label safety study. So again, I'm sure you're quite familiar with what Prader-Willi is, but there is a significant overlap of between the main organ that kind of is the center of all Prader-Willi symptoms, and the hypothalamus is very central for sleep and wake regulation. So again, in the hypothalamus, there are some critical functions as regulation of hunger satiety, sleep-wake states, release of growth hormone, endocrine function, metabolism, body temperature. And on the other side, hypothalamus is very key in the sleep-wake regulation. And again, histamine is one of the central mediators that regulate sleep and wakefulness. And histamine is synthesized in the tuberomammillary nucleus, or TMN as we call it. And it actually, I mean, this is a very complex slide, but pretty much what it does is increase the wake promoting neurotransmitters and excites the wake promoting circuits in the brain. And it inhibits all the circuits that lead into sleepiness and sleep. So it works at the hypothalamus level, and it works at the cortex as well, either as a direct histamine effect on cortex or through some other neurotransmitters. So what it is, Pitolisant? It is the first-in-class mechanism. It's a new mechanism of action. Again, you might be familiar with stimulants and wake-promoting agents like the amphetamines, or wake-promoting agents like modafinil and modafinil. This is very different. This is a medication that works through histamine, and it is highly selective histamine receptor antagonist, inverse agonist. It works by increasing the histamine levels in the brain, and as we just mentioned in the previous slide, histamine is one of the major wake-promoting neurotransmitters in the brain. It was discovered in France by a company which is named Bioprojet, and the founder of Bioprojet, as I said previously, was a professor that was part of the discovery of the histamine 3 receptor, and Pitolisant was his lifelong love, if I can say that. It was approved in the European Union in March of 2016 for both indications for narcolepsy, excessive daytime sleepiness, and cataplexy. First, it was approved in August 2019 for treatment of excessive daytime sleepiness in narcolepsy. And about a year later, a little over a year later, it was approved for cataplexy in narcolepsy. The main difference between this drug and all the other wake-promoting drugs or stimulants is that this drug is not regulated and it's not scheduled. So in other terms, it's the difficulty around scheduling and obtaining controlled substance are not relevant for Pitolisant. It is oral tablet and it's administered once a day. It has quite a long half-life. That's why we advise our patients to take Pitolisant right after they wake up. The therapeutic dose range that's approved in adults for the US are 17.8 or 35.6 milligrams. And again, the most common adverse events that we have seen in clinical trials were headache, insomnia, nausea, and anxiety. So, I mean, this will be the slide that I'll transition to Crystal. This is our study, and I'll let her walk you through what it is and how the study is going. What are we looking for in terms of participants, and what is the study going to be for you? Crystal?
Thanks a lot, Albana. And just to echo what Albana said, thank you so much again for taking some time out of your day to hear more about the trial. If you did happen to listen in last November, you might notice a few things have changed with the goal of helping to just ease the burden on you on travel and certain procedures. So I'll go into the background now. So we are currently enrolling people ages 6 to 65 in the clinical trial, and we're focused on the safety and impact of pitolisant on excessive daytime sleepiness. And we're enrolling the first 60 eligible participants. So it doesn't matter what age you are, as long as you're between 6 and 65, we'll take the first comers. And since the first part of the study is the double-blind treatment phase, no one will know, including the study doctor, which treatment the participant will be assigned to. So that person could be assigned to low-dose pitolisant, high-dose pitolisant, or placebo. And then after completing the double-blind treatment phase, participants will have the option to roll into the open label extension, also known as the long-term safety extension. And during that part of the study, all participants will receive pitolisant regardless of which treatment arm they were assigned to for the double-blind part. So why are we studying pitolisant in people that have PWS? Well, we want to know how safe it is and how well it's tolerated, and we want to know how effective it is in treating the excessive daytime sleepiness aspect of PWS. So those aren't the only things that we're looking at. We want to learn more about how it affects behavior, learning, attention, memory, and also how pitolisant might affect the caregiver of a person with PWS. As far as caregiver burden, we also want to see how it might affect hunger in the person with PWS. And if we happen to find a signal in any of these other symptoms, this could open up the door for other studies down the road that look at those specific symptoms. So here for the key inclusion criteria, I would like to refer you to the clinicaltrials.gov website, and that's noted below. You'll see the reference number that you can look that up with online. We only list the key criteria here just because there are quite a few. These are some of the important ones, and the rest of them can be found on the clinicaltrials.gov site. And you can always find the most up-to-date information on the clinicaltrials.gov site, whether that's eligibility criteria, which sites are participating, and so on. And like I mentioned before, we are looking to enroll the first 60 eligible people into the study, and that includes having a confirmed diagnosis of PWS. And the other criteria will actually be determined during the screening visit and baseline visit procedures. So during the screening visit, this all relates to the criteria listed on the slide. But during the screening visit, patients will be sent home with a paper diary to record bedtime and wake up time, and that information will actually be used to determine if you'll be eligible to go on to the next visit, which is the baseline visit. And so the PSG, which is that third box in the top right-hand corner, that stands for polysomnography, and the MSLT, which stands for multiple sleep latency test, both make up the overnight and daytime sleep studies. And those will be performed as part of the baseline visit at the site. So that sleep study takes about a day and a half to complete. And the final score of the MSLT, which must be less than or equal to 8 minutes, means that it also means that the person fell asleep in 8 minutes or less on average during the test. If they meet that criterion, they will be eligible to receive study drug. And so the other important part of the key inclusion criteria, as far as being in the study, would be having a consistent caregiver. And that person would be ideally the same person throughout the study that can reliably attend the study visits with the participant. And the reason we want to have the same caregiver throughout the trial is so that we ensure the data that we are collecting remain consistent. And that's because we'll be asking the caregiver about the participant's sleepiness, if that changes, as well as other behaviors, and the impact on the caregiver burden. So having two caregivers report information at different times might muddy the waters a little bit. Next slide, thank you. So let's talk about some of the wake promoting treatments that are allowed. This question comes up a lot because of course people that are sleepy tend to be on wake promoting medications. So the good news is that study participants are allowed to remain on their wake promoting medications as long as they're on a stable dose for the duration of the double-blind portion of the study. And so if participants are taking a sedating medication, that's actually also permitted, granted they are willing to also, of course, remain on a stable dose for the duration of the double-blind phase. So examples of that would be hypnotics, benzodiazepines, antipsychotics, alpha agonists, anticholinergics, and antidepressants. And during the pre-screening call with the site or during a screening visit, the study coordinator and principal investigator or study doctor can review that list of medications that your care recipient might be on and determine if any are exclusionary or not. So here we'll go over some of the key exclusion criteria. This isn't a full list again. That full list can be found on clinicaltrials.gov. But reasons that a participant would be excluded are as follows. So if the participant had a diagnosis of another genetic or chromosomal disorder that's not PWS, if they have untreated obstructive sleep apnea or are unresponsive to treatment for that, if they do not agree to discontinue a medication that's prohibited, they would be excluded. And then participants that are receiving medications that are strong CYP2D6 inhibitors, strong CYP3A4 inducers, or a medication known to prolong the QT interval in the heart. And your study doctor can help you figure out what classes of medications your care recipient might be on to figure out whether those would be exclusionary or not. Another reason a person might be excluded from the study is if they might have a history of seizures within 6 months that have been treated with medications that are strong CYP3A4 inducers. And if a participant does have a history of seizures, that seizure history needs to be stable for at least 3 months prior to enrolling in the study. And then your study doctor or study coordinator can help determine if they're stable if you aren't sure. And I do just want to note that regarding the obstructive sleep apnea, participants that have that can still enter the trial as long as it's adequately controlled and stable. So for example, if your care recipient uses a CPAP, that's fine. They would just continue to use that throughout the study, and especially during the baseline visit for the sleep study and the final visit of the double-blind treatment for that sleep study as well. So what exactly happens during the study? Well, the first visit is a screening visit, which might last from 3 to 6 weeks or so, depending. That time is variable just because some participants may need to wash out of medications and some may not. During the screening visit, some blood work will be taken for labs and safety purposes. Participants will have a physical exam, medical history will be taken, and then a couple of other tests performed. Also, participants will be given a sleep diary in which they'll record the time they went to bed and the time they woke up for 14 nights, like I mentioned earlier. And that sleep diary will be given back to the site before the next visit occurs, just to make sure that participant meets the initial eligibility criteria. And making sure the diary is accurate and complete is the responsibility of the caregiver if that participant needs help. The second visit, visit 2, is the baseline visit. And during that visit, the study doctor will review medical history again. We'll make sure that they're still eligible to continue on in the study. The nighttime sleep tests and daytime sleep tests, the PSG and the MSLT that I mentioned earlier, will be performed during this visit. And if that person meets the MSLT criterion, they will be eligible to receive study drug, and that will be taken once daily in the morning after waking up. And that dose will be recorded in a daily diary. The next 2 visits at day 22 and day 50 are used to assess how the participant is progressing through the study, and so we can continue to assess the safety, tolerability, and impact of pitolisant on excessive daytime sleepiness. We will also still be reviewing the impact on behavior, learning, attention, memory, hunger, and caregiver burden. And these visits, these 2 specific visits, may be completed remotely and with a home health nurse that can come to your house so you don't have to travel to the study site. And then at the last visit, visit 5, which happens on day 77, the sleep studies will be performed again. And if the participant is interested and still eligible, they can opt to enter the long-term extension, long-term safety extension, or open label extension. So what should the caregiver expect during the study? So like I mentioned, the caregiver should ideally be the same person throughout the study, just so we have consistent information with the participant. And so they can also accompany the participant to the study visits. They'll also be responsible for making sure the sleep and study drug diary are filled out accurately and completely if the participant needs help. They'll also need to fill out questionnaires during the study visits that ask about the participants' symptoms as far as sleepiness and the caregiver burden again. And then in between the on-site visits, they'll also need to be available for check-ins from the study coordinator or study doctor, just to make sure everything is going well. So where are these sites and where can you go to participate in the study? So this picture is a little bit outdated as of this week, and we currently have 11 sites around the US, and we're adding more within the next few months. So we are covering travel to study visits, including airfare, if you need mileage reimbursement. We're covering lodging and meals for the participant and caregiver, so no money has to come out of your pocket to participate in the study. And I have the sites listed here below. We have several in California. We have Delaware, Florida, Illinois, Maryland, Utah, and 2 in Texas that are coming up, and then Nashville. And I'll be updating clinicaltrials.gov as we add more sites. So again, please continue to check that for the most updated information as we'll be adding more. Lastly, I'll just mention the long-term safety phase of the study again. Participants will have the option to enter this after completing visit 5 of the double-blind portion. And just as a reminder, there will be no placebo during this part of the study. All participants will receive Pitolisant at a dose that's appropriate for their age, and information will continue to be collected for safety and effectiveness purposes during periodic study visits during this part of the study. So that is the end of our presentation. Albana and I are available to answer questions, so please feel free to ask.
Thank you so much, Crystal and Albana, for presenting this wonderful information. We, just as a reminder for anyone who wants to submit a question, please do so through the Q&A, and we will get to as many questions as we can. Crystal, let's start with a pretty basic question that a lot of parents have reached out with, which is, from an observational perspective, how sleepy does a person need to be in order to participate? What should a parent be looking for? Is it naps throughout the day? Is it an early bedtime? How could they gauge whether their child might be eligible?
I mean, so then I can probably start, and then Crystal, she can jump in. Again, we request patients to be sleepy. Again, it's very hard for me to explain how sleepy they should be. That's why I think that the easiest way for parents is to reach out to the closest site, or either through, that's probably the best way. And then normally in the sites, they'll be asked some questions about the level of sleepiness. And based on this level of sleepiness, they'll be invited to participate. And between the screening and baseline visit, we'll have some idea of how sleepy they are. And again, the final determination about whether they'll be able to participate in the study will be at the MSLT, which is the test that comes after the night in the lab, after the PSG. And during the MSLT, they have to have mean sleep latency of less than 8 minutes. I know that many of the parents are familiar with these tests. Many of the parents have done sleep studies to their kids. Some of them have done MSLT. So again, to me, the advice that I can give to parents is just go to the map or go to clinicaltrials.gov or send us an email. We do have an email at Harmony if you're interested in participating in the study, and we'll direct you to the closest site where they'll talk to you, they'll assess your eligibility, whether you are a good candidate to participate. And we work very closely with the site, so we'll help them and we'll work with you so that this transition is as easy as possible for you.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think from more of a parent perspective, trying to determine if your child might be more sleepy than someone that's maybe not considered sleepy, is think about, you know, if they're sitting at home, maybe reading or watching TV, do they tend to nod off pretty easily? Do they fall asleep as soon as they get in the car? Things like that. What we've heard from some parents is that, you know, my care recipient falls asleep immediately after getting in the car and we're driving. So just thinking about things like that. Do they tend to take naps at school? Do they have certain accommodations that are needed? So I would just consider those things. And like Albana mentioned, if we get you in touch with a study site, they can help determine if your care recipient might, or if the trial might be a good fit for your care recipient.
Thank you. And is daytime napping a requirement? If someone doesn't fall asleep during the daytime, would they be excluded from this study?
No, daytime napping is not a requirement. Again, this is more of a proxy of how sleepy they are, because again, the sleepier you are, the more you tend to fall asleep. But again, if they have this natural tendency to fall asleep, that will be captured by the multiple sleep latency test. Well, the whole test, and again, for those that have been through the test, I'm sorry that I'll be a little redundant, but the kids will be given, or adults will be given 5 opportunities to fall asleep during the day. And they'll sit in a dark room with no noise and in a relaxed position. And if they fall asleep quickly enough, even if they don't nap during their normal daytime, they'll still be eligible in the study. So again, when we talk about how sleepy they are, this is just the proxy for what we are looking in our study to establish.
Great. Thank you for that clarification. There's a couple of questions regarding the sleep study, as well as a couple of questions regarding mood disorders and concurrent drugs. So let's talk a little bit about sleep studies. One question that came in earlier today: my loved one recently completed a sleep study. Can we use those results, or are we going to be required to do another study?
Unfortunately, they'll be required to do another study, just because we need to, it's a sequence of events. So at the screening visit, they'll be given the sleep diary. So they'll have to record their sleep pattern for at least 2 weeks. And then based on these, we'll say, okay, do they sleep enough during these 2 weeks? And based on that determination, they'll go to the PHG and MSLT the day after PHG. So because the sleep study is a snapshot of what happened in the time they did the PHG, we cannot use that study. We'll need to do the sleep diary and then the PHG and then the MSLT for us to confirm that these patients are good candidates for our study.
Yeah, and just to add to that too, having that past history of the sleep study is great information to provide to the study doctors, so they kind of know how sleepy the care recipient might be as far as baseline. And then the reason we have to repeat that study again is because we are trying to control for multiple factors. And so we need every person having the same exact procedures performed during the sleep study. Otherwise, that could confound data as well. So we just have to be consistent with each person that's enrolled.
And then does a sleep study need to be completed at the trial site, or could it be done at the local hospital?
We require that to be done at the trial site. Again, for the same reason. I mean, for those that have been through sleep study, you know how complicated it is, the montage, all the tests, all the placement of the electrodes. So we do have standardized way to collect all that information, and we work with the lab that reads all the sleep studies, and they have requirements for all the sites so that all the sleep studies are done the same way. And that's why we require them to be done at the site where you're going to be seeing your treating physician for the study.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's talk a little bit about medications and eligibility. So a question came in, can my loved one stay on his or her stimulant specifically for ADD during the study?
So again, they can. That's one of the changes that we made in the protocol since the last time we spoke. We are now allowing for them to be on stable dose of their stimulants or wake promoting agent. That being said, though, they still will need to be sleepy enough to meet the enrollment threshold. So again, this is a decision that the patient will have to make, because again, if you take your stimulants, you may not be sleepy enough to meet the eligibility of for the study. But if you're on stimulants and you still feel you are very sleepy, then you can be on stable dose. We only require 4 weeks of stable dose. And that's actually made me make another comment as I was listening, Crystal, going to all our inclusions and exclusions and procedures. That can be very complicated. And we don't ask you to memorize all of what we said. Just go to a site and we'll be working with them and with you, mostly with the principal investigators. We have been doing a lot of medication checking, so they'll record all the medications that you have been currently taking, and we'll check these medications again against the list of prohibited medications. Some of them are prohibited, but some of them, even if they're antidepressants or antipsychotics, they are allowed for the study. So again, work with your study site, and we'll be working with you to kind of make the decision about CONMEDs and what can you be stable on.
So just to confirm, what I'm hearing is, if you are on medications and you're not sure whether or not that excludes you or is allowable, you should contact your site of choice, meet with the principal investigator, and in a phone call, you could go through some of these medications and determine eligibility.
100%. Those pre-screening type calls, as we call them, are really helpful because, if the study doctor finds out that there is something that the care recipient absolutely can't come off for whatever reason, and it is a prohibited medication, that will save you time, potential travel, and so on. So having that initial call is definitely helpful to determine if the study is a good fit.
How about a diagnosis of bipolar mood disorder? Would that be exclusive for the study?
No, not by the diagnosis of bipolar mood disorder. We currently were aware that Prader-Willi comes with some psychiatric comorbidities, and that's why we have been very careful when we thought about our exclusion criteria. So we only exclude active psychosis or active schizophrenia. So again, if you're in a manic episode and you're psychotic, for the manic episode itself, you might not be eligible, but if that manic episode is behind you and you are on stable treatment, you can participate.
Well, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us for today's webinar. If you do have questions post-webinar, please reach out to the Harmony team. Their email is here on the slide. It's clinicaltrials@harmonybiosciences.com. I'd just like to reiterate, the first step to making new treatments available to our loved ones with PWS is filling these PWS clinical trials. You know, I'd like to personally thank everyone who has participated or is considering participating in a study. I know from personal experience, you know, participating in a study, it's not always convenient, but you are really making a world of difference for your community. And it's your involvement that will ensure new treatments for PWS. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you, Susan.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Susan.
And bye, Crystal.